one of the most well-known, a lot of people like it, worker placement mechanics coming up.
Hi, it's Tarrant.
And Stella from Meeple University. Welcome back to my Tabletop diary. It is now fortnightly rather than weekly because we have pretty much every week live stream. So hopefully you can join us there, by the way.
Yes.
So today we are talking about one of our favorite mechanics. Well, there are a lot of my favorites, so this is one of our favorites. It didn't quite make it to the top 5, but it's making it to the top 10, worker placement. So what is worker placement?
It's a lot of things, and
Well, that's a very broad explanation.
it is. And I mean, I won't get too far into the arguments that I know happen on BGG about worker placement.
Yes.
Yeah. The simplest thing is that worker placement is choosing something by putting a worker onto a space on the board.
Okay.
And usually choosing an action. Pretty much always choosing an action. And that can be in many forms.
It can be very restricted, it can be not restricted, it can be bumping other people,
Yep.
it can be coupled with other mechanics just thrown into it.
Yeah, it can be round based, it can be continuous, it can be, I guess, semi-continuous. So there's a lot of different versions of it.
What was the first ever worker placement game you've ever played?
The first one I ever played, and it really shapes, for me, what defines worker placement, was Lords of Waterdeep.
Okay.
And it's usually the game that I will recommend to people as the entry-level worker placement. And it is your standard... It's essentially a round-based action draft. That's what the true mechanic is.
Mm-hmm.
So you're drafting the actions that are on the board, and you just happen to be using a worker to block the space off. And so it is a draft. It's there's lots of different actions you can take. Only one player can take each. Your meeple goes down, and then at the end of the round, they all come off, and the full amount is there again.
I quite like that. It's one of my first, but it's not my very first. I'm almost sure my first worker placement was Stone Age.
Yeah, which is another very common introductory, or not introductory, but gateway level
Of worker placement, yeah.
Yep.
The other one that I really like...
And it's the same sort as well. It's a round-based
yes.
action draft.
Similar to Lords of Waterdeep.
Yep.
The other one that I really like is, I would say, worker placement-ish, is Architects of the West Kingdom.
Yep.
Where the worker placement with a twist. What would you call that?
So it's not a... And this is where you get... It's not a draft. It's certainly not a draft or pure draft, because...
You can add the worker
well,
and not.
it's a soft draft, I guess.
Yes.
Because if you get in first, you get a cheaper go at it. If you get in, but you're not blocked out, unless you run out of workers. So it is it's like a soft draft, and that's where the whole concept of worker placement being an action draft has so many different options these days. And then it's also continuous because it's kind of, I think of it as action point management. So you've got your workers who represent your action points, and then when you run out of them, you need to get them back through some other means, which is usually people arresting them and giving them back to you, or there's the action you can take to bust them out, things like that.
Yes.
So it's a little bit of a draft, it's a little bit continuous, sort of action point management. And I think for me, that's what a lot of the continuous worker placement games are. And this is the BGG argument about worker placement isn't a mechanic.
Okay.
And it's not. It's a way that a lot of different mechanics manifest.
Yet I use that like all the time. What is it? It has got worker placement because it's something that a lot of people are familiar with to get the concept, to try to learn a particular game. Which brings me to Euphoria.
Yeah, which is really the third major class, I guess. I I kind of, in my mind, I call it Stonemaier worker placement because...
It's got Stonemaier name. Well, there you go.
And I don't know if it was first used there or only used there, but certainly I came to see it in Euphoria, and it was used again in Charterstone. And it's essentially that you put your worker on the board. You've got free hand to put your worker wherever you want because you can just knock the other player's worker out. So that it's essentially, it's not a draft because it's not competitive. But workers that happen to be on the board at different times will influence things. When you get your worker back in Euphoria, it's you roll and you might lose them because they're too intelligent. So there's sort of a tactical... tactical placement of workers to meet a certain strategy.
That's correct. It is quite... I don't remember anything that is quite like that, those two games. So essentially, it's which action that's going to benefit you most and which action you think is going to benefit the least for your opponents if you buck them out.
And, you look at a game like... something like a Gallerist, maybe, where you've got those 4 actions. You've got free hand to bump someone out. You leave the workers, you give them something by bumping them out. So I guess it's got that Euphoria-ish thing, except you're giving them something by bumping them out. With the kicked out action. But then it also sets... It's a convenient way of making sure you can't take the same action twice in a row unless someone kicks you out and lets you do it.
Yeah.
And often, you'll find that's more and more common is the worker placement where you've got the single worker whose sole purpose is to remind you what action you did last and make sure you don't do it again. I mean, Scythe is like that. Except you've got your own board.
There's another one that is like Scythe. I can't quite remember it, where you can't use the same action twice in a row of... Like, only that part is like Scythe.
Yep. I mean, then you get to... What was the one I was thinking of there? And then you sometimes get games... I mean, think of Pipeline. There's a worker and there's action spots. So it meets the definition of worker placement. But you can take the same action multiple times. You don't interact with other players' workers at all. It solely reminds you what action you've taken. Is that a worker placement game?
I'm not too sure, actually.
I think it's...
It might be.
I don't consider it a worker placement game. No? I think the worker has to... I actually consider that an action menu game, and it's just where the actions are located is you influence it. But because the workers don't interact with each other, the workers don't... They don't have any restrictions on where they can go next. So... Yeah, they're there and they remind you what action you took.
That's true. So I guess these mechanics that we apply to certain board games is not exactly like a dead-on definitions of things. It just helps us to maybe explain familiarity to newer players to play board games, because that really certainly helps. Because there are so many board games. I'm just looking at board games behind this camera. Yeah. It certainly helps to define, and then, it's got like this. I find myself easier when I learn, what's the mechanics? I quickly look at it. I might have mentioned it in my previous vlog. This is a mechanic, and then you just like, like this, but it's similar, but not quite. Okay, yeah, that's good, sweet.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a game like First Class, not the most well-known game, but it's, it is...
I have not played it yet.
Yeah. It's got all the actions are on cards and they're laid out. And when you want to take an action, you pick up the card and it comes off. That is a round-based action draft, just like Lords of Waterdeep and just like Russian Railroads, which is the same designer as First Class. But you don't put a worker down onto anything. So it's not worker placement, but it is the same as your standard round-based worker placement.
That's actually true, yeah.
And then you look at something like Puerto Rico, where you pick up, it's a lead and follow game. You pick up the card that tells you which one you've picked up, and then it's not there for anyone else. They could just as easily have a board that people put their one worker on, and then it would be a worker placement game.
Okay.
So, yeah, As I say,
Yeah.
this argument has happened on BGG about worker placement not being a mechanic.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I'm not going to argue it too hard or anything. But,
Yeah, I know.
it's a manifestation of a mechanic. Anyway.
Fair enough. So speaking about that, your supposedly worker placement, what is some of your favorite worker placement? I say worker placement mechanic.
Well, there are so many of them, so
I know.
it's hard to go. I do always enjoy Russian Railroads. I think it has a really nice balance of action draft.
I kind of like that twist in worker placement because there are times where you just want to go there, you gotta go there, you can't go there, and that's worker placement, right? That's kind of like the earlier version of worker placement where somebody blocks your action and that's it, you're done for the round.
Yeah.
That feeling of, oh no, I really, really need this and I can't do it. But then the twist, the one that we talk about, that's kind of, oh, okay, yeah, I can just do this, that's okay. Although it might not be worker placement, but quite enjoy that.
Yeah, there's so many nice twists to that.
Yeah.
And one that we didn't mention is the one where placement and resolution happen separately. And you've got like alchemists.
Like Pan Am as well.
Yeah, Pan Am as well.
Alchemists.
A couple of the check games ones, Dungeon Lords and
Last
Dungeon Pets,
Wheel?
I think both fall into that.
And Last Wheel. Was it?
Yeah, and...
We haven't played it for a while. We will live stream this, so we will play it soon before live stream.
Yeah. I can see Artemis Project up there. So there are a lot of games where you do the placements and then they're resolved in a certain action order rather than as you place it. So you know what's important, but you still got to plan ahead. Snowdonia is another one.
Crystal Palace, which you haven't played.
I haven't played
So
that
it's got
one.
resolved like from 1 to 9 or whatever it is.
Yeah. You know what? I put, from just a pure worker placement perspective, I like Snowdonia. It plays quick. The actions are simple. You have to time everything very well, and you've got the cards that let you like jump in and mess up other people's plans. So I think it actually works really nicely as a round action draft worker placement.
And there are so many modules in Snowdonia. And by the way, we have that video. How many more? 17? Was it 18?
Something like that.
Yeah, modules of Snowdonia. So check that out if you are interested. So I do want to know what you think of worker placement. Is it the mechanics? It is not. Do you like it? What's your favorites? Recommend us anything? So write down in the comment sections below. So that is it all. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully you'll enjoy that. And as usual, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe to us if you haven't already done so. And hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Our next video, I should say. Bye.
Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about worker placement. One of the most boring of all.
The way you say it, it sounds like it's boring.